You bury someone you love. You choose a box. You choose flowers. You choose words to say out loud, even though the person can no longer hear them. You do this without thinking about why. But the real answer is far stranger than tradition. It is older than religion. It is older than language itself. Somewhere in a cave in what is now northern Spain, more than 100,000 years ago, a group of Neanderthals dug a shallow pit. They placed a body inside it. They arranged the limbs with care. Then they covered it with earth. Why would a species with no writing, no recorded history, and a brain we once assumed was primitive go through the trouble of burying its dead? Death does not need a reason. Grief does not need permission. But behavior like this, deliberate, repeated, patterned behavior, that needs an explanation. Your instinct might be to say it was practical. Bury the body, stop the smell, avoid disease. That is a modern brain talking. That is you projecting forward. The archaeological record tells a different story. At Cima de los Huesos, a cave site in Spain, researchers uncovered the remains of at least 28 individuals deliberately deposited over generations. Among them was a hand axe made of pink quartzite, a stone not native to the area. It had clearly been carried there. It had clearly been chosen. The anthropologist Juan Luis Arzuaga, who led excavations at the site, argued that the object was placed there on purpose, not discarded by accident, not a tool left behind, a gift. Think about what that means. Someone walked for miles. Someone selected a stone specifically because it was beautiful and rare. Someone carried it to a body that could no longer see it, hold it, or thank them for it. That is not survival behavior. Survival does not require beauty. Here is where it gets stranger. You might assume ritual, meaning, and mourning arrived only with Homo sapiens, only with us, only with the species smart enough to invent gods and afterlives. But Neanderthals were not us, and they appear to have done this too. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, researchers found a Neanderthal skeleton positioned in a way that suggested intentional burial. Limbs flexed, body placed in a shallow depression carved into the rock. The paleoanthropologist Eric Trinkhaus spent decades studying Neanderthal remains and argued that the pattern of deliberate positioning at multiple sites was too consistent to be coincidence. A being with no written language, a being we spent a century calling a brute, digging graves, arranging bodies with intention. What were they trying to say? Nobody knows for certain. That is the honest answer. But here is what the evidence suggests, and it will change how you think about the box you would choose and the flowers you would pick. Burial is not about the dead. It never was. It is about the living. When a body is placed into the earth deliberately, when it is positioned, when it is accompanied by an object, the person performing that act is doing something for themselves. They are marking absence. They are converting grief, which has no shape, into an action that does. Psychologists call this externalization. You take something that exists only inside your mind, a feeling too large to hold, and you give it a physical form outside your body. A stone becomes the shape of your loss. A grave becomes a place your grief can go, instead of staying inside you indefinitely. The psychologist and grief researcher Colin Murray Parkes, who spent his career studying how humans process bereavement, described mourning rituals as a way of organizing chaos, not eliminating pain, structuring it. That's what a 100,000-year-old hand axe was doing in that cave. It was structure. It was a Neanderthal saying without words, "This mattered. This person mattered. I cannot undo what happened, but I can mark that it happened." Now think about your own life. You have never dug a grave with your bare hands. You have probably never carried a stone for miles to place beside a body. But you have posted something online after losing someone. You have lit a candle. You have kept a voicemail you'll never delete just to hear a voice that no longer exists anywhere else. Different tools, same behavior. The archaeologist Paul Pettit, who has spent years studying the origins of human mortuary behavior, has argued that these acts, spanning from Neanderthal burial pits to modern funerals, all serve the identical underlying function. They convert an unbearable absence into something the living can manage. You are not so different from the being in that Spanish cave. You just have better tools for it. Here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. For most of human history, burial required effort disproportionate to any material benefit. Digging into hard earth with stone tools took hours. Carrying a rare object across miles of dangerous terrain took risk. There was no survival advantage to any of it. And yet it happened again and again, across different species, in different eras, on different continents, long before anyone could explain why. That should tell you something about what grief actually is. It's not an emotion layered on top of your biology as an afterthought. It is load-bearing. It shaped behavior powerful enough to override the basic logic of energy conservation in a species fighting to survive. Grief was never a flaw in the system. It was written into the operating code from the very beginning. There's a wrinkle here worth sitting with. Not every archaeologist agrees on how much intention to assign to the earliest burials. Some researchers argue that natural processes, sediment, cave collapse, scavenging animals, could explain certain remains without requiring deliberate human ritual at all. The debate over Cima de los Huesos and sites like it is still active. Science rarely hands you certainty. It hands you evidence and lets you sit with the ambiguity. But even in the most conservative interpretations, one pattern holds. Somewhere, at some point, long before anyone wrote a word down, a creature looked at a body that would move no more and could not simply walk away. Something stopped them. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was attachment. Maybe it was something we don't yet have a name for. Some early flicker of the same ache you felt the last time you lost someone and reached for your phone to call them anyway out of pure habit before remembering. That flicker connects you to a cave in Spain more directly than almost anything else you carry. So the next time you choose a flower or write a card, or simply sit quietly beside someone who is grieving, know that you are participating in one of the oldest continuous behaviors your species has ever performed. Older than agriculture, older than cities, possibly older than your own species itself. You bury someone you love. You choose a box. You choose flowers. You choose words to say out loud, even though the person can no longer hear them. And somewhere, 100,000 years ago, someone else did the exact same thing, for the exact same reason, without ever knowing you would do it too.